Well, hello there. I'm Papa John and welcome to my channel, and we are continuing with the 25 slashing Santas of Christmas, as today I will bring you 4 evil European Santas. And if you want to see more slashing Santas throughout the next couple of weeks, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment down below on your favorite killer Santas. And let's get into this, because here are 4 European evil Santas. In the last video, we left off in 2005 with Santa's sleigh, and so now we're going to hop across the Atlantic into Europe, but we're going to stay in 2005 as we look at 2005's Cuento de Navidad, also known as A Christmas Tale. When a group of kids are playing around and they're running in a forest and they come across a pit. And what is in the bottom of this pit? Well, it looks like a Santa Claus has fallen into this pit. Or, quite frankly, it's a woman dressed as Santa Claus. Because you see, she just robbed a bank wearing a Santa costume. And as she was running away, she accidentally fell into a pit that was covered up with like leaves and branches and stuff. And now she's stuck down there, and these kids have found her. And these kids are basically holding her hostage because they want the $2 million that she stole. Now, if you don't know, this film is directed by Paco Plaza, who went on to co-direct and co-create the Wreck franchise, which is honestly a franchise I discovered earlier this year and absolutely fell in love with. He single-handedly directed the third one, which kind of has that Halloween 3 syndrome where its connection to the franchise, I think, hurts it more than helps it, because I think Wreck 3 is actually a really good, just fun zombie movie. That being said, this movie is not on the same level as the Wreck films, in my humble opinion, but there's still a lot of fun to be had. Now, if you're a fan of It, or Stranger Things, or The Goonies, I would recommend checking this out. It's along the similar lines where you have a group of kids coming together and they're facing this horror situation, or what turns out to be a horror situation, and, spoiler alert, that may or may not turn supernatural at the very end. Now, this isn't going to have anywhere near the budget of an It or a Stranger Things, and it's not going to be as good either. That being said, if you are a fan of that stuff, still check it out, especially if you want a holiday version of it. That being said, the third act can be a lot of fun when this woman gets out and starts chasing these kids around in her Santa costume with the axe. It does get a lot of fun. There is a zombie element. I'm not going to say whether or not there's actually zombies in the movie, but there is an element because these kids are obsessed with a zombie movie, and they do make this weird, I guess, cinematography choice where the only adult you actually see the face of is the woman in the pit. Whenever there's another adult on screen, their back is either turned, or one of the father's heads is covered up by like a rear view mirror, or the camera's just at the kid's level, and so you just see the body of an adult. But like I said, you can go ahead and check it out if you like things like The Goonies and you want something with a holiday flair and you don't mind subtitles. And next, we're going to 2010, where we have 2 different evil Santas from Europe. And we're going to start off in the Netherlands with a Dutch film called Saint. So every time that there is a full moon on December 5th, Sinterklaas comes back to wreak havoc on Amsterdam and kidnap children. Now, there is one little elephant in the room with this film that you should know before going in as sort of, I guess, a trigger warning if you want. There is some blackface in here that has not aged very well at all. I mean, it wasn't really aged well back then either. The director's not making a statement about it. It's just sort of, it was a Dutch tradition that still existed in 2010s where people would dress up as Black Peters, which is Sinterklaas's helpers, sort of his version of the elves in this myth version of Santa Claus. And since then, they've gone more to doing sooty stuff, sort of like a chimney sweeper with soot on his face rather than full-on blackface. That being said, this is a fun movie. I enjoyed it a lot more last year than I did this year, but I still think it's a lot of fun. It's from the director Dick Moss, who directed the cult classic slasher Amsterdam from the 80s. I believe he also directed the Killer Elevator movie. Now, this does end up being quite a bonkers movie with some of the ways it goes towards the end, and it does have some dated CGI for sure. I do think once you get to the end and you kind of realize how big of scale this is, you realize how small of scale you've actually been watching, and that's kind of disappointing, but at the same time, I can understand it from a budgetary standpoint, probably. But you do get some wicked kills and some fun action as well, especially one where you have these teenage boys in one of their parents' cars and they run into Sinterklaas and his black beaters, and it just wreaks havoc on them. And only one of them survives. And there's a nice little police investigation kind of thing going on as well, and somewhat of a government cover-up. The other film from 2010 is a Finnish film called Rare Exports. Now this one is somewhat of a slowish burn, similar to A Christmas Tale, but the third act is definitely worth it. So you have this boy who lives in sort of this secluded society of people who basically hunt like reindeer or deer in general, and that's how they make their money, is selling meat. And they're secluded in this Finland wilderness, and they live basically right at the edge of the Finland-Russia border. And right across the border is this giant mountain where there's a group of, I believe, Americans, or maybe they're Englishmen, that are trying to essentially digging with dynamite. So they're blowing holes into this mountain because they believe that there is a frozen Santa Claus, the original Santa Claus, buried in this mountain. Well, eventually they find him and his helpers get set loose. You don't realize they're his helpers at first. You think it's just Santa Claus. That's sort of a reveal that happens. I'm sorry I spoiled that for you. But his helpers look like Santa Claus, and one of them eventually dresses or is forced to dress like a Santa Claus. So even though you never actually get to see Santa Claus in this, you do get to see someone who looks a lot like him trying to kidnap children and be evil. And this movie takes some wild directions in the third act, because this little kid, this main character you're following throughout the film, knows or discovers throughout the film, by the end of the film, that the myth of Santa Claus was not originally a happy-go-lucky, charitable guy. He was actually quite evil. And seems to be somewhat of a trend with European Santas. You have Rare Exports, you had Saint in the last one, where apparently the myth of Santa Claus did not start off all good. And lastly, we have a Norwegian film from 2013 that will sadly might end off this video on a sour note, because it's definitely not for everybody. I was interested in it because I'm always interested in boundary-pushing extreme horror, and a lot of people had listed this as the most disturbing Christmas movie. It has that grindhouse, grimy camera feel and camera quality that you might get with Terrifier. That being said, the gore effects aren't on the same level as Terrifier. The budget isn't the same level. The acting isn't the same level. That being said, there's something in the opening scene that hit me like a jump scare, even though I don't think it was supposed to be. So it opens up and you have this guy essaying a woman in front of her entire family. And there's a little boy. There's this little like newborn baby sitting in like a stroller thing. And that's not what hit me with a jump scare. I was kind of expecting something along those lines, considering this is the most disturbing Christmas movie. The thing that caught me like a jump scare was when he grabbed a electric saw and said, "Oh, start with the youngest one first." And I was expecting a cutaway, to the family's reactions, something you might see in like Terrifier, where you don't actually see the kids get chopped up in that opening scene. No, you just see the saw right into this, and it just goes boom, and it hits you like a jump scare. And I'm one of those rare people that can get behind a lot of disturbing things that push the boundaries of what you can do with fictionalized, simulated horror. That being said, at the end of the day, I do think and believe there needs to be somewhat of a heroic outcome and final outcome if you're going to make that kind of a movie. Otherwise, it just feels like a simulated snuff film. And this does not have a final girl. It doesn't have any survivors by the time you get to the end of the movie. None of that happens. And so it just kind of makes you feel dirty in a bad way by the time you get to the end and realize that the movie's over with and you just watched a guy do that and that's all that happened. Now, I do think there's an interesting juxtaposition where you have the beauty of Christmas and sort of the joyful, charitable nature of the figure of Santa Claus doing the most disturbing, horrific things you can think of. That being said, the execution and just the final outcome with having no survivors, no message, no nothing, it just kind of leaves it a little lax. Granted, I can sometimes be the person that says experiencing it can be just as artistic and impactful as a good story or plot. But even in the experience, you need someone to come out in the end, and that doesn't happen here. I do think there's an interesting quality here. It just never hits the mark. If you are a fan of disturbing cinema and want a Christmas movie, this might be your best bet, though. So if you're one of those very rare people, maybe you can check out and enjoy Christmas Cruelty. Well, there you go. Those are 4 evil European Santas. Go ahead and leave your comments down below. Have you seen any of these movies? Did I put you on to any of these movies? Leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell as well so you can watch me talk about more evil Santas in the near future. Happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, and Merry motherfucking Christmas.
Det var motorsåg og bensin her. 4.999 for soja og 169 for bensinet. Men siden jul skal vi se 5.000 da.